The city of Madrid glittered under the evening lights as Alejandro Villalba, one of the most feared and admired businessmen in Spain, lay motionless in a private hospital suite that looked more like a five-star hotel than a medical room. Owner of a multinational construction empire, Alejandro had built his fortune from nothing, brick by brick, deal by deal, betrayal by betrayal. To the world, he was untouchable, cold, strategic, a man who trusted numbers more than people and contracts more than promises. But that night, the man who controlled billions decided to surrender. Control in the most unexpected way. He faked being unconscious. It had started as an experiment, a cruel, calculated test born from suspicion. Alejandro had recently overheard rumors that someone inside his company was leaking confidential information. Investors whispered. Competitors seemed too prepared. And for the first time in decades, Alejandro felt something unfamiliar, doubt. Not about his intelligence, not about his power, but about loyalty. Who was real? Who was pretending? And most importantly, who truly cared about him? When he collapsed during a board meeting, perfectly staged. Of course, the room erupted into chaos. Directors shouted. Assistants cried. His nephew Eduardo, who secretly hoped to inherit the empire, immediately began making phone calls to lawyers instead of doctors. Alejandro noticed everything before closing his eyes. Then he allowed himself to fall into stillness. Hours later in the quiet of the hospital suite, Alejandro remained perfectly still while machines beeped softly beside him. The doctors had been discreetly informed by his private lawyer that this was a temporary medical evaluation. Only 2 people knew the truth. Everyone else believed he was in a deep coma. Visitors began arriving. First came Eduardo. His voice trembled, but not with sorrow. Tio, you should have prepared better. The board needs leadership. Alejandro felt his nephew's hand briefly touch his arm before he stepped away. Then Eduardo whispered something that made Alejandro's blood run cold. Don't worry. I'll take care of everything. I've been waiting for this. Alejandro remained still, heart pounding beneath the illusion of weakness. So that was it. Next came 2 senior executives. Their polished shoes clicked against the marble floor as they spoke in hushed tones. The merger will move forward faster now, one muttered, without him blocking it. The other chuckled. Funny how life works. Alejandro felt something crack inside him. All those years of building loyalty through fear had created obedience but not love, respect but not sincerity. But then, late that night, when the hallway had grown silent and the city, lights shimmered, through the glass windows, someone unexpected entered the room. It was Camila. Camila Torres had been Alejandro's personal assistant for 3 years, quiet, efficient, always professional. She came from a modest neighborhood outside the city and had earned her position through relentless effort. Alejandro had rarely looked at her beyond her productivity. To him, she was competent but replaceable. She walked slowly toward the bed, clutching a small notebook to her chest. Alejandro could hear the soft rhythm of her breathing. Then, to his surprise, he felt her gently take his hand. Señor Villalba, she whispered. Her voice trembled, but not with ambition. I know you can't hear me, but I need to say this. Alejandro's entire body focused on that voice. I know everyone sees you as a hard man, and maybe you are. But I've seen something different. He felt her fingers tighten slightly. I've seen the way you secretly paid for that employee's surgery last year. I've seen the way you stayed late, reviewing projects so no one would lose their jobs during the crisis. You pretend not to care, but you do. Alejandro's breathing almost betrayed him. I don't know if you'll wake up, she continued softly, but I need you to know something. You changed my life. Silence filled the room. When my father lost his job, I was going to quit university. You never knew. I never told you. But the scholarship you approved for employees' families, that paid for my last year. You saved my future. Alejandro's heart tightened. And I know you don't trust anyone. I see it in your eyes every day. But not everyone is here for your money. Some of us are here because we believe in you. A tear slid down Camila's cheek, landing on Alejandro's hand. And if you wake up, I hope you choose happiness, not just power. Alejandro had faced billion-euro negotiations without flinching. He had survived betrayals, lawsuits, and economic collapses, but nothing had ever shaken him like this. Because this wasn't manipulation. It wasn't strategy. It was truth. Camilla leaned closer. And if you don't wake up, thank you for seeing potential in someone invisible. She gently placed the notebook on the bedside table. These are ideas I've been working on. For the company, I didn't think you'd ever read them. But maybe one day, she kissed his hand softly and left. The door clicked shut. And for the first time in decades, Alejandro Villalba cried. Not because of fear, not because of betrayal, but because one person, out of dozens, had spoken with pure sincerity. In that still hospital room, Alejandro realized something powerful. Wealth can buy silence, but it cannot buy honesty. Authority can demand obedience, but it cannot force loyalty of the heart. And the one voice he least expected had reached him the deepest. If this moment already has you thinking about loyalty, truth, and second chances, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because stories like this don't just entertain, they transform. But what Alejandro would do next would shock everyone, and especially Camilla, because the man who entered that hospital room as a strategist would leave it as someone completely changed. 2 days later, the media exploded. Tycoon Alejandro Villalba regains consciousness. The board members rushed back to the hospital, rehearsing their sympathetic expressions. Eduardo arrived with flowers and a carefully prepared speech about unity. Executives lined up like actors waiting for their cue. Alejandro lay in the bed, now officially awake. Doctors hovered nearby as cameras flashed outside the building. But something was different. His eyes, they were calm, observant, almost peaceful. He requested a private meeting with the board immediately after being discharged. The conference room that once echoed with his sharp commands now felt strangely tense. Alejandro entered slowly without his usual intimidating stride. He sat down, folded his hands, and began. I heard everything. Silence fell like a bomb. Eduardo's face drained of color. The executives avoided eye contact. Alejandro continued, his voice steady. When a man is silent, people reveal who they truly are. He turned toward Eduardo. You were ready to take my place before I was even gone. Eduardo stammered. Tio, Enough. Then he faced the executives. You saw opportunity in my weakness. No one spoke. Alejandro stood. For years, I believed fear built strength. I was wrong. Fear builds masks. He paused. And masks fall when the room is quiet. The following announcement stunned the corporate world. Alejandro dissolved the pending merger that benefited only the board. He restructured leadership. Eduardo was removed from succession plans. 2 executives were dismissed. But that wasn't the real shock. The real shock came when Alejandro announced the creation of a new foundation, funded with a significant portion of his personal fortune to provide scholarships, healthcare assistance, and entrepreneurship opportunities for employees and their families. And at the center of this initiative, he appointed Camilla Torres as Director of Social Development. When Camilla was called into his office that afternoon, she assumed she was being fired. Instead, Alejandro stood as she entered. Señor, Camilla, he interrupted gently. I read your notebook. Her heart skipped. You see people. You understand impact. And you speak with honesty, even when you think no one is listening. She swallowed nervously. I need someone beside me who values people more than profit. Tears welled in her eyes. Señor Villalba, I was just doing my job. No, he said softly. You were doing something far greater. You were being human. Months passed. The company transformed. Productivity rose, not from fear but from motivation. Employee satisfaction increased. Investors noticed something rare, sustainable loyalty. Alejandro still negotiated fiercely. He was still brilliant. But he no longer ruled through intimidation. He led with clarity and respect. And sometimes, late at night, when the office lights dimmed and the city shimmered below, he would remember the moment in the hospital when he lay powerless, yet heard. The most powerful truth of his life. He realized that his greatest investment had never been buildings or contracts. It had been people. And the woman he once considered replaceable became irreplaceable. Years later, during a company anniversary event, Alejandro addressed hundreds of employees. I once pretended to be unconscious, he admitted publicly. Gasps echoed through the hall. And in that silence, I discovered who I truly was. He looked toward Camilla, standing confidently among the leadership team. Success without humanity is empty, and power without trust is fragile. The crowd rose in applause, but the loudest applause came from within his own heart. Because sometimes it takes losing control to regain your soul. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that integrity still matters, and that kindness can transform even the hardest hearts, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear this message today. More powerful, life-changing stories are coming your way, and you won't want to miss them. The transformation of Alejandro Villalba did not go unnoticed. Within a year, headlines no longer described him as the Iron Magnate, but as the billionaire who reinvented leadership. Business magazines requested interviews. Universities invited him to speak. Analysts tried to decode the sudden rise in company morale and profits. But Alejandro knew the truth. It hadn't started with strategy. It had started with a voice in the dark. And yet real change is never tested in comfort. It is tested in crisis. One rainy afternoon, just as Madrid's skyline disappeared behind heavy clouds, Alejandro received devastating news. A rival corporation had launched a legal attack, accusing Villalba Group of insider misconduct. The allegations were false, but dangerous. If proven in court, they could destroy decades of work. The boardroom filled again. Tension returned. Lawyers argued. Investors panicked. Old Alejandro would have reacted instantly. Ruthless counterattacks, public humiliation of the rival CEO, pressure tactics behind closed doors. But this time he listened. Camilla sat across from him, reviewing documents carefully. She looked up. "They want you to panic," she said calmly. "They want you to go back to who you were." Alejandro leaned back in his chair. "And what if I do?" She held his gaze steadily. "Then they win twice." Silence lingered. He realized something powerful. The world was waiting to see if his transformation was real or temporary. That night, Alejandro stood alone in his office. The city lights flickered below like distant memories. He remembered Eduardo's ambition, the executive's betrayal, the loneliness he once carried like armor. Then he remembered something else. Camilla's trembling voice. "You pretend not to care, but you do." The next morning, instead of launching an aggressive public defense, Alejandro did something unexpected. He called a press conference, not to attack, but to invite transparency. Standing before cameras and reporters, he spoke with steady conviction. "We have nothing to hide. We welcome a full investigation. If we have made mistakes, we will correct them. If we are innocent, the truth will stand." The room buzzed. It was not weakness. It was confidence without arrogance. Days turned into weeks as regulators examined every detail. Employees watched anxiously. Investors hesitated. And during that time, something extraordinary happened. Workers across all levels began posting messages of support. Former employees defended the company online. Even competitors quietly admitted that Villalba Group had become one of the most ethical firms in the industry. Alejandro realized something profound. Trust, once earned, becomes protection. Finally, the verdict arrived. The accusations were dismissed. Not only was the company cleared, but evidence surfaced that the rival corporation had fabricated claims in an attempt to manipulate stock prices. The media shifted overnight. Villalba Group cleared. Transparency strategy backfires on rival. But Alejandro did not celebrate with champagne or revenge. Instead, he gathered his employees in the main auditorium. "I once believed power meant control," he began. "But real power is standing firm without losing who you are." He paused, scanning the crowd. "This victory does not belong to me. It belongs to every one of you who chose integrity over fear." Applause thundered through the room. After the event, as the building slowly emptied, Camilla remained behind. "You passed the test," she said softly. Alejandro smiled faintly. "No, we did." She studied him for a moment. "Do you ever regret pretending to be unconscious?" He thought carefully. "Yes," he admitted. "Because I had to fake weakness to discover strength. But I don't regret what I heard." Their eyes met, not with hierarchy, but with mutual respect. Time continued to move forward. The foundation expanded internationally. Scholarships multiplied. Families once struggling now built businesses of their own. Alejandro began mentoring young entrepreneurs, not just about profit, but about purpose. But the most meaningful change happened quietly. Alejandro started going home before midnight. He visited his mother's grave more often. He apologized to former colleagues he had once dismissed harshly. And one evening, during a company gala celebrating 5 years of transformation, Alejandro surprised everyone again. Taking the stage, he held the same notebook Camilla had left beside his hospital bed. "I kept this," he said. Camilla's breath caught. "This notebook reminded me that leadership is not about being the loudest voice in the room, but about listening to the quietest one." He turned toward her. "And sometimes the person you overlook becomes the person who saves you." The crowd watched as he extended his hand, not as a boss, but as a partner in purpose. In that moment, the empire Alejandro built with steel and contracts evolved into something far greater. It became a legacy of courage to change, a legacy of choosing humanity over ego, a legacy born from a man who once pretended to be unconscious and awakened more alive than ever before. And maybe that's the true message of this story. Sometimes life puts us in silence, not to weaken us, but to help us hear what truly matters. If this final chapter inspired you, if you believe people can change and that integrity still has power in today's world, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this story, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that transformation is always possible. More unforgettable stories are coming. Stories that challenge, inspire, and awaken something powerful inside you. Because sometimes the greatest awakening begins when everything goes quiet.